If you think money brings families together, this story will change your mind forever, because when my grandmother died, my entire family turned against me in less than 24 hours. The people who had smiled at me for years suddenly looked at me with hatred in their eyes, and it all started with a secret hidden for more than 20 years. My name is Emily Whitmore, and until last year I was just another granddaughter in one of the wealthiest families in the country. My grandmother, Margaret Whitmore, was the founder of Whitmore Holdings, a billion-dollar empire built from hotels, real estate, and technology investments. Everyone in the family believed there was only one person destined to inherit everything: my Uncle Richard. He was the oldest child, he worked in the company, and he acted like he was already the owner. At every family gathering, he sat next to my grandmother, talked about future business plans, and treated the rest of us like employees. Nobody questioned it. Nobody imagined any other outcome. Then my grandmother passed away at the age of 82. The funeral was held 3 days later. Hundreds of people attended. Politicians, business leaders, celebrities, and longtime friends all came to pay their respects. While everyone was mourning, my relatives seemed focused on something else: the inheritance. I noticed the way they whispered to each other, the way they kept glancing at Uncle Richard. It was obvious they believed a new king was about to take his throne. 2 days after the funeral, the family gathered inside the company headquarters for the reading of the will. The boardroom overlooked the city skyline. A long, polished table stretched across the room. My uncle sat at the head of the table with a confident smile. My cousin sat beside him. The lawyers entered carrying several documents. The atmosphere felt tense, but nobody looked worried except me. I was nervous because I hated family conflict. The lead attorney adjusted his glasses and began reading. At first, everything sounded normal. Certain properties were divided among family members. Donations were made to charities. Personal items were distributed to friends and relatives. Then the attorney paused. He looked up from the document and said, "The remainder of the estate, including 100% ownership of Whitmore Holdings, is to be inherited by my granddaughter, Emily Whitmore." For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The room became completely silent. I thought I had heard him wrong. Then I saw my uncle's face. The confidence vanished instantly. His mouth hung open. My cousin stared at me as if I had committed a crime. One of my aunts actually dropped her phone onto the table. "What?" Uncle Richard shouted. "Read that again." The attorney calmly repeated the statement. There was no mistake. My grandmother had left everything to me. Every share, every asset, every controlling interest in the company. I felt dizzy. I never expected this, not even for a second. My grandmother had always been kind to me, but I never imagined she would choose me over her own children. The room exploded into chaos. Everyone started talking at once. My uncle accused the lawyers of making a mistake. My cousins demanded another copy of the will. One aunt began crying. Another started yelling that I had manipulated my grandmother. The accusations came so quickly I could barely process them. I left the meeting feeling completely overwhelmed. That evening, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly wanted to talk. Some tried to be friendly, others were openly hostile.
They all wanted the same thing. They wanted me to give up the inheritance. The next morning, Uncle Richard arrived at my apartment. He didn't even bother pretending to be polite. He told me the company belonged to him. He said my grandmother must have been confused when she signed the documents. Then he offered me money, more money than most people earn in a lifetime. All I had to do was transfer control of the company to him. When I refused, his expression changed instantly. The smile disappeared. "You're making a huge mistake," he said before walking away. Over the next few days, things got worse. Family members stopped speaking to me. Rumors started spreading online. Anonymous messages appeared on social media accusing me of stealing the inheritance. Someone even leaked my personal information. The pressure became unbearable. Then came the family meeting. They invited me to my grandmother's mansion, claiming they wanted to discuss a peaceful solution. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The moment I arrived, I realized I had made a mistake. Every relative was there. They were all waiting for me in the living room. The atmosphere felt like a courtroom. One by one, they explained why I should surrender the company. Some begged, some threatened, some tried to guilt me by saying I was destroying the family. For hours, they pressured me. Finally, I stood up and said a single word. No. The room erupted with anger. My uncle slammed his hand on the table. One cousin called me selfish. Another said I was greedy. Then my aunt pointed toward the front door and told me to leave. As I walked out, Uncle Richard shouted something that sent chills down my spine. You have no idea why she chose you. At the time, I thought it was just another threat. But later that night, I discovered a sealed envelope hidden among my grandmother's personal belongings. On the front, written in her handwriting, were 7 words that would change everything. Open only if they turn against you. My hands trembled as I stared at the envelope, because deep down, I already knew what it contained. The truth. And whatever secret my grandmother had protected for 20 years was finally about to be revealed. My hands trembled as I stared at the envelope, because deep down, I already knew it contained something my grandmother had spent years hiding from the rest of the family. The room around me felt silent as I carefully broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. Emily, if you are reading this, then the family has already shown you their true faces. I hoped they would prove me wrong, but I knew they wouldn't. There is something you deserve to know. 20 years ago, a decision was made that changed the course of our family forever. My heart started pounding. I continued reading. Your Uncle Richard has spent his entire life believing he built this company with me. The truth is very different. He almost destroyed it. I froze. That couldn't be right. Richard constantly talked about how much he had sacrificed for the business. He acted as if he was responsible for its success. Yet my grandmother was claiming the opposite. The letter continued. In 2006, Richard secretly took control of several company accounts and invested hundreds of millions of dollars into a fraudulent project without my approval. When the project collapsed, Whitmore Holdings came within weeks of bankruptcy. Thousands of employees would have lost their jobs. Our family name would have been ruined. I read the sentence 3 times to make sure I wasn't imagining it. My uncle had nearly destroyed the company. My grandmother went on to explain that she had spent years quietly repairing the damage. Publicly, she protected Richard because exposing the truth would have destroyed the family. Privately, she never trusted him again. Then I reached the final paragraph. There is another reason I chose you. Inside my office safe is a black folder. It contains evidence, contracts, recordings, and documents. When the time is right, you will understand everything. I immediately drove to her mansion. Since I was now the legal owner, I had access to the property. Most of the staff had already left for the evening. The house felt strangely empty without my grandmother. I went directly to her office. Behind a painting was a hidden safe. The combination written in the letter worked perfectly. Inside sat a black folder exactly where she said it would be. I opened it and felt my stomach drop. There were financial records, emails, signed agreements, and recorded transcripts. The evidence was overwhelming. Richard hadn't merely made bad business decisions. He had lied, hidden losses, manipulated reports, and blamed innocent executives for his mistakes. But one document stood out from all the others. It was labeled Private Family Matter. I opened it carefully. The first page revealed a secret so shocking I almost dropped the folder. 20 years earlier, when my parents were struggling financially, my Uncle Richard had attempted to force them to sell their shares of the company for almost nothing. My father refused. According to the documents, Richard became furious and spent years trying to push my parents out of family business matters. My grandmother had secretly protected them. Then, I found another letter. This one was much shorter. Emily, if Richard ever challenges your ownership, show him document 47. I quickly searched through the folder until I found it. The document was a signed agreement. My grandmother had forced Richard to sign it after the investment disaster. The contract stated that he would never receive controlling ownership of Whitmore Holdings due to his actions. In exchange, she agreed to keep the scandal private. Suddenly, everything made sense. Richard hadn't been passed over by accident. He had lost his chance decades ago. The next morning, I received an urgent call from the company's board of directors. They wanted an emergency meeting. Apparently, Richard had been contacting executives all night, telling them the will was invalid and that he would soon take control of the company. I arrived at headquarters expecting tension. What I found was chaos. Several board members were arguing, reporters had gathered outside, employees were spreading rumors throughout the building. When Richard walked into the boardroom, he looked confident, too confident. He immediately began speaking. He claimed my grandmother had been manipulated. He accused the lawyers of misconduct. He insisted that he was the rightful leader of the company. Then he pointed directly at me. "She's inexperienced," he said. "She's emotional. She has no idea how this business operates." Several board members looked uncomfortable. Others remained silent. Richard smiled, believing he was winning. Then I remembered document 47. I stood up and placed a copy of the agreement in front of every person at the table. Richard's confidence vanished the moment he saw the first page. The color drained from his face. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. The room fell silent. One board member adjusted his glasses and started reading. Another quickly turned through the pages. Within minutes, everyone understood exactly what they were looking at. The agreement was genuine. The signatures were verified. The dates matched company records. Richard had known for 20 years that he would never inherit control of Whitmore Holdings, yet he spent decades pretending otherwise. Suddenly, the questions started. Board members demanded explanations. They wanted to know why the document existed. They wanted to know what had happened in 2006. Richard tried to stop them. He claimed the agreement was irrelevant. He claimed it was taken out of context. Nobody believed him. Then I revealed the financial records from the black folder. The boardroom exploded into disbelief. People who had respected Richard for years were staring at him as if they had never met him before. One director actually stood up and walked away from the table in shock. Another demanded an independent investigation immediately. Richard realized he was losing control. Desperate, he accused me of forging evidence. That was when the company's legal team entered the room. They had already reviewed the documents. Every record was authentic. Every signature was verified. Every claim could be supported. For the first time in my life, I saw genuine fear in my uncle's eyes. The meeting ended with a unanimous vote. Richard was removed from all remaining leadership positions. Security escorted him from the building. As he left, he turned toward me with an expression I will never forget. It wasn't anger anymore. It was panic. Because he finally understood that the truth he had hidden for 20 years was no longer buried. But the biggest surprise came later that evening. While reviewing the rest of my grandmother's files, I discovered one final recording she had made shortly before her death. In it, she looked directly into the camera and said, "If Emily is watching this, then she already knows what Richard did. But there is still one secret she hasn't discovered. The real reason I chose her has nothing to do with the company." I stared at the screen, completely confused. My grandmother smiled sadly before continuing. "There is something about our family that only 3 people have ever known. Me, your father, and one other person. The answer is hidden inside the lake house." The recording ended. That was it. No explanation, no clues. Just another mystery. I sat there for nearly an hour trying to understand what she meant. The lake house had been abandoned for years. Nobody visited it anymore. Yet according to my grandmother, the final secret, the one she considered more important than a billion-dollar company, was hidden there. At that moment, I realized the inheritance was never the real story. The company was never the real secret. Whatever waited inside that lake house was the truth my grandmother had protected for more than 2 decades. And I had a feeling that once I found it, nothing about my family would ever be the same again.